I call the honourable member Dennis O'Rourke.
Good choice, Mr Chairman. Thank you. Mr Chairman, there is now a very large question over whether government resources allocated to the Canterbury recovery are anywhere near adequate. And the member who has just spoken constantly looks at the Christchurch recovery through rose-coloured glasses, seeing only some of the good things, and yes, there are good things, but never acknowledging the problems, the many problems that are still with us in Christchurch. Mr Speaker, we all know that billions more will be needed for the recovery. The Prime Minister himself has said so. There is nothing to indicate that in what the government has allocated currently for the rebuild. And it's been 3.5 years since the February 2011 earthquake. We are now in a fourth winter. Thousands of homes, in fact, are still unrepaired. Bare section and self-insured landowners are taking the government to the Supreme Court over the illegal offers made to them, and the legality of the red zoning itself is in question. Dozens of homes are still expecting to be flooded yet again before the winter is over. Port Hills residents are still in limbo, awaiting a decision while living in rented accommodation while their own homes rot. A massive housing crisis in which people simply cannot find an affordable home to buy is getting worse by the day. And those who need to rent, well, that's a nightmare, Mr Chairman. And even if they can find a home to rent, they would have to spend something like $1,000 a week for an average 3-bedroom house. Now, if that's not a crisis, if that's not a housing crisis, then I don't know what is. But, Mr Chairman, I especially want to talk about EQC and its treatment of the owners of units and multi-unit dwellings. No minister could be satisfied with the progress of the EQC in the settlement or disposition of the claims made in respect of multi-unit dwellings. Where the units and multi-unit dwellings are assessed by EQC as being under the 100,000 cap per unit, but the damage claimed is greater than this, and when the cost to repair the building as a whole will exceed the total of the EQC assessed damage for all individual units together, then, Mr Chairman, that situation is currently in an absolute shambles. In far too many cases, EQC is resisting a realistic sum for repairs of whole buildings where they are multi-unit buildings. And, Mr Chairman, only yesterday in my office there was a case where the EQC had failed to assess adequately the cost of repairs to all of the units in one small 6-unit building in the central city. They had failed to offer nearly enough for the repairs to obvious damage to each unit, but they had also failed to assess the building properly as a whole, leaving the owners to take legal action. In that case, the total assessment was only $350,000, which is clearly grossly insufficient to repair all 6 units, so that the total for EQC purposes had to go under the $600,000 cap for all 6 together. And that didn't take into account repairs that needed to be made to the building as a whole to make it leak-proof again, or to the land and driveways and many other issues. The inadequate assessments by EQC in those cases means that the private insurer takes no part, and therefore the owners are left to battle EQC on their own. Private insurers would be much better taking over the process in those cases for the full repair or replacement of the whole building. But this is prevented by EQC intransigence and inadequate technical assessment. Sure. Their only interest appears to be to find a way to justify to keep the costs under the cap. The Minister, as well as EQC, seem careless about the people who are caught in this trap of an inadequate offer by EQC for repairs. It insists that units are under cap when they're clearly not, leaving the owners to pay tens of thousands of dollars to engineers and assessors to do EQC's job for it. as well as to pay lawyers' fees and other costs.
I call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Chairman, one of the ways you measure recovery is by looking at the numbers of people who are settling claims. Now, I'll concede one thing to Nicky Wagner's speech. Well,